You're listening to a Comics XF podcast.
X-Men. Get it!
Hey everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Battle of the Atom, your weekly X-Men podcast where we normally rank every story from A to A.
I'm Austin.
And I'm Adam. Zack got tied up this week. I am joined again by my Comics XF colleague, X-Men expert and real gentleman of leisure, Austin Gorton. Austin, how are you doing?
Hey, Adam. Hello, everybody. I am doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm just really happy that you were able to join me tonight. We decided that instead of doing some ranking, we opened up this summer mailbag and got some great questions from our listeners. So I thought the questions were pretty good. I'm excited to answer them.
I am frankly impressed by the caliber of questions we got. These are some really good ones. Some fun ones to answer, some ones that really made me think and actually do a little bit of research, which was great.
Yeah, absolutely. So normally the show works where we're ranking based on patron requests. If you would like to be one of those people, you can head over to patreon.com/Battle of the Atom, reach down into your hearts and your pocketbooks, throw a couple coffers our way. A measly $5 gets your own pick for a bespoke episode based on your request. And we hope that you'll join in there. But this week, no requests. We're going to jump right into the mailbag. These are all questions that were taken from Twitter and Blue Sky. And we want to thank everybody for asking these questions. We are going to start with some questions about the most recent, I guess, wave era. I don't know what we're calling this, but the
publishing initiative,
marketing scenario. You know it, you love it. Maybe I don't know if I love it. But Tommy B's From the Ashes 2024. So we've got some questions about that. The first one that's here. This is a good question. This made me think. And Austin, I'm going to bounce this off you first. This is from Hughes87N on Twitter. Should the X-Men have had a brief hiatus after Krakoa rather than jumping right into publishing the new lineup?
So I guess this I broke this down into a couple of different parts, which is the first answer is, I mean, probably, but we all know that isn't going to happen because Marvel's not going to not publish X-Men books for any sustained period of time. The second part I thought was they kind of did as far as like Fall of X ended, and then we went a few months before From the Ashes came. We just also got Heir of Apocalypse and a bunch of Bloodline tie-ins and a few other bits and bobs that kind of trickled out after that. So really my answer to this question is I'd really have preferred that they just not rush through Fall of X just so that we could have 4 months of filler before launching From the Ashes. How about you? What did you think?
Well, I think you're dead on. Is that there was really a bit of a hiatus, right? You know, we got all that Blood Hunt stuff and the Era of Apocalypse. I don't know what was going on with that. Don't know if we'll ever see Robo Doug, whatever that. What was his name? What was his name at the end of that?
Revelation.
Revelation. Yeah,
because it's the Apocalypse and Revelation.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Whatever. I don't think they really needed. I agree with you. Like, let Fall of X actually have the time that it needed, so that it could be the best that it could be, and it wasn't rushed. I don't think it needed a break. I just think that if the new creative team needed more time, there's always ways to do that. I mean, we all know the story that Hoxpox wasn't going to be on time, and that's how we got Age of X-Man. So there's always something you can do, right? As filler. For me, I'm reading this question, and my response to this is more that I actually don't think that the From the Ashes is rushed as much as I just wish there was a more cohesive, connective tissue between all of the books that are starting to come out now and where those characters were at the end of the last era. And I know that these writers have probably had since last August or so,
Mm-hmm,
to start
mm-hmm.
writing these scripts, or at least coming up with their pitches. And honestly, it feels a little undercooked to me. I'm reading certain things and certain characters doing certain things that don't seem quite in line with what they've been doing for like the last 4 or 5 years.
And everything just feels like it's taking place in a narrative vacuum, like with a few exceptions. Every book has its own kind of premise and its own cast of characters, which is fine. I mean, that's normal, but it just means that we get just a crap ton of number one issues, each one setting up its own premise, and each one kind of squishy on the details as far as the shared setting. Like, are mutants feared? Are they hated? Are they loved? Are they kind of feared but kind of loved? And every book is kind of doing it differently, and there's no sense of where they all fit with one another. And they don't necessarily have to. I don't need like they're all crossing over right away or anything, but they each feel like they're taking place in their own pocket universe rather than a shared universe, and that is disappointing, frustrating, confusing.
I just don't think it's what we're used to. I'm thinking like
Right.
post schism. I know why Cyclops is in San Francisco and Wolverine is in Westchester. Right. I have like a general sense.
Right.
Does it totally
Right.
make sense? That's debatable. But like, I know the impetus for why we're doing what it is we're doing right now. I'm
Mhm.
just a little confused, but I think that this leads pretty well into this next question. What is this next one?
So this next question is from Lucario2405 on Blue Sky, who asks, which titles from the current wave of X-Men comics do you think will generate the most interesting discussion when you're rereading it for the pod in a few years?
That is tough because we really haven't gotten that much of it yet. I would say of what's come out so far, the one that I would want to talk about the most is NYX, only
Mm-hmm.
because that seemed to have that connective tissue I was talking about, with sort of, it's
Mm-hmm.
almost as if they're in New York as kind of expats from Krakoa. And like, you've got Prodigy teaching this class at college, and it, it still seems to be stemming out of the stories that were being told. So that would probably be the one, but I don't know. I mean, in like 5 to 6 months, I might be a little bit more invested in one of the other books. Exceptional still isn't even, it's Exceptional, right? Is that the,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, the third X-Men
And
one
that,
with Emma and Kitty. Yeah, that hasn't come out yet.
no, and that I think is the one that the entire creative team has been like, oh, this is the best one. This is the one that we could turn into a TV show and stuff like that. So who
Right.
knows? I don't
Yeah,
know if I have a good answer for this yet.
my answer for this, not that it's my podcast that will be discussing this in a few years, but just from a like, what do I think has some kind of like meat on its bones for discussion, was NYX, and then the other one that I thought of was X Factor, only because at least in one issue it's not very good, and that is worth talking about too. That's fun to talk about. So yeah, I think you're totally right, which is it's early and all of these books are still establishing their identity. So for me, it was what's the best one so far and what's probably the worst one so far. Those are probably the ones that, if they stick to that, will generate the most topics for discussions going forward.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, even just hearing you say that, sort of ranking it in my mind, I'm thinking about the rest of the line, and I don't know that I would be that excited so far to revisit
Mm-hmm.
all this stuff yet, because I don't know where it's going. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
Gail seems to want to be doing like Southern Gothic horror. I'm not sure what
Mm-hmm.
that's all about. I have no idea what Jed McKay is really doing in Alaska with
Right.
Cyclops, other than maybe crossing over with the Avengers this fall. So I'll need a little more time.
Yeah.
It's got to grow
Yeah.
on me. Um,
It's a really interesting dynamic because I know that Tommy B talked a lot pre-launch about like wanting there to be a book for everybody, like
mhm.
in terms of different tones and vibes and all of that. And I get that, and I agree with that that's a good approach to take for it. But they almost steered too hard in that direction where each book is so
Mhm.
isolated that there's really no reason to not pick up anything that you're not 100% into, which again, that's fine for normal people, but that seems like a weird business decision for Marvel to have made. Like, you want a setting that entices people to have to feel like they need to buy everything. And that's really not what this is at all. If you pick up X Factor and like, this isn't for me, you can just drop it because there's no sense that it's going to connect up with anything else anytime soon.
Right. Yeah, no, that's really true. And it's not what X-Men fans are used to either, right? Like, we're used to at least picking up maybe our 2 or 3 favorite books a month, and then, maybe delving into the others occasionally, but that's not really what's going on. Lucario 2405 also asked another question, but I want to skip that one for a second. Maybe we can come back to it. Our good pal Robert Secundus asked this question, which I really thought about for a while because I liked this a lot. He said, "What is the most cursed pitch for From the Ashes ongoing that you can think of, including creative teams?" And I am curious, Austin, what did you come up with for this? Because
so I came up with Deadpool's Angels, written by Rob Liefeld and drawn by Greg Land, in which each story, it'd be kind of like Secret Defenders, where Deadpool is the Doctor Strange, and then each story arc he would recruit a team of exclusively women to go out on some sort of mission.
Oh my God.
And it would just be like Deadpool and 3 women drawn by Greg Land in every story arc.
I mean, if you had a different creative team on that could actually be kind of fun.
I mean, it could be a very fun premise, but yeah, the creative team is what really sinks it.
Wow. Yeah, you put maybe give that book to Gail Simone and David Baldion, and I'm like, okay, I'll read that.
Yeah, exactly.
My pitch was more of an entire X universe pitch. From the Ashes, because it really does seem like we're trying to go very like 90s retro on this thing. So my idea was that at the end of Krakoa, there's a new old beast, right? Like, the evil beast is replaced by the old 70s Avengers beast. So my idea here is that there is something just a little bit wrong with this beast. Like, he's just not quite there, which I hope they still do something like that, because that'd be really fun. But here's where the cursed part comes in, is that he's so obsessed with the past because he can't have caught up with the present, that he basically decides to pull another time travel stunt and takes all the X-Men and sends them back to the 90s. So here's my lineup, and this does cross over with yours just a smidge. Okay, I did use 2 of your creators. All right, so my first book in my From the Ashes 90s line is Uncanny X-Men by Chris Claremont and Salvador Larroca. We're just gonna go right wholeheartedly. Let Claremont have his steel and just like take over the X-Men again, and let's see how absolutely bananas it is. All right.
LaRocca was one of those creators that I penciled in on my short list of, let's put him on a book. That would be pretty cursed.
Yeah. And I really want, in this scenario, LaRocca to be doing what he did with the Obi-Wan series, where he's like, tracing over a lot of TV stills, just really lowbrow stuff here.
Yeah.
My second, I have 5 books in this line. I've really thought about this, is we're bringing back X-Men adjective list, and we're going to bring back someone who I don't think anybody wants back, and that's Scott Lobdell. So Scotty Lobs is going to write this thing. And then, to make matters worse, we're going to have it drawn by Howard Chaykin. So it's going to be Scotty Lobs illustrated by Howard Chaykin. All right, this is where I cross over with you a little bit. We're going to give Rob Liefeld writing duties on X-Force, but it's going to be called Major X-Force. So it's X-Force, but it's being run by Major X. And because Rob doesn't want to draw anymore and is retiring or whatever, we're going to let Brett Booth draw that book.
There you go. Okay? Yep.
All right.
That fits.
We're going to do a new X Factor book, except it's going to be Mark Miller writing it and Greg Land drawing it. And I don't have an artist picked out for this. I was thinking about like contemporary Frank Miller, but I know he's pretty busy right now. But I want Jeff Johns to come over and do Wolverine re-origins. So brand new origin for Wolverine from one of, I think, comics' most loathed personalities. So that's my cursed pitch, Rob. I hope you liked it.
I'm trying to think of who would be a good artist for that that Wolverine re-origin.
It'd have to be just somebody like from, you know, a Daniel Way comic or something like that I just don't sync up with, right? I don't know. But that's okay.
That's good. I like that. Just take the subtext from the ashes, which is let's go back to the 90s and just make it literal. Like we are back in the 90s now.
Well, now I got to ask Rob because he asked the question. I'm assuming that he had his own like cursed pitch. So we'll see if he can let us know what that was. All right. You want to take this next one?
Yeah. So this is from @NotBenRiley on Twitter, or X, whatever the hell it's called.
I don't call it X. I refuse to call it that.
Okay. All right. It says, you guys haven't had a chance to talk about Peach Momoko's Ultimate X-Men yet. How are you feeling at this point?
I'm going to be completely honest and say I only read the first issue. So I feel really bad about this. Yes. How are you on this? Are you caught up?
No, I am not. I've read the first 2 or 3 issues. I mean, it's utterly gorgeous, masterfully illustrated. I know that Jake Murray on Comics XF has done some reviews on it and has raved about it. I think it's gotten a fair amount of critical praise as well, and I too feel bad that I have not stuck with it because I think it's really interesting. But yeah, I am behind. I'm terrible. I'm the worst kind of fan because there's the little part of me inside my brain that's like, this is like a side thing. This doesn't quote unquote count. And so then that pushes it further down my reading queue than other stuff that's objectively worse than it.
Oh yeah.
But here I am.
It's so funny that you say that because that's probably the reason that I haven't been keeping up with it, is just because it's not like part of the normal continuity, which is stupid because it's doing something really bold and original. I love the body horror elements that I read in the first issue. And of course, Peach Momoko is like a superstar at this point. And the art that's in that book is out of this world. So I just feel bad because I do want to catch up with this book, but it's almost the kind of thing that I want to wait for a trade and kind of read maybe like 6 issues of it at once.
Right.
You know, just
kind of really immerse yourself in that setting and that core group of characters and whatnot.
But I want to like back up what you're saying though, is that like, for me, I know a lot of people are really raving about Hickman and is it Chiarello? Who's doing the art on Ultimate Spider-Man? Or Chichetto. It's Chichetto, right?
Chichetto.
You know, I know people are raving about that, but like the Ultimate line in general does very little for me. I've never really clicked with it, so you know, but that's no excuse. I should check it out. We got quite a few really good, just general X-Men questions here. So this one is from Strictly Worse on Blue Sky, our good friend Chris Edelman. What, Austin, is your favorite unsolved mystery of X-Men? And I am really curious what you're going to say, because you know your X-Men inside and out. So what is your favorite unsolved mystery?
So I have one kind of smallish one that really isn't that big of a deal, and then another one that has always kind of nagged at me for years and years and years. The first one is that at the end of X-Men 98, X-Men 97. So this is not X-Men 97 the cartoon, but X-Men 97, the comic book from the late 70s. Really the kind of the kickoff of the long Phoenix story arc. The closing panels of that issue are an image of a mysterious person watching Stephen Lang, watching the X-Men picking up the pieces after their fight at the airport with Eric the Red. Who is watching Stephen Lang watch the X-Men? he's wearing whoever it is, I don't know that it's a he, they're wearing the glove that is not unlike the new costume that Polaris donned in that issue with the spiky backs and all that. So I think Emperor Deken of the Shi'ar is probably who it's meant to be, but I don't know why he'd be watching Stephen Lang, and that has never been answered to this day. We still don't know. It's been homaged by later artists in other issues, but we have never gotten an answer to that. And then
That's a good one. Give me the other one.
The other slightly larger one is what the hell was going on with the X-Men's computer when they were living in the Reavers base during the Outback era. Claremont teased a few times that it had a mind of its own, and that it was like, I think at one point Storm learns that Jean Grey is alive because the computer of its own volition puts up a footage of a press conference from with Jean and Scott at from X Factor, stuff like that. There was this sort of like, what's going on there, and like so much else with Claremont's run, he just kind of tossed that out there and then moved in other directions and never had a chance to get back to it. And I'd still really like to know at least what his plans were for that. And I don't think I've ever seen anything from him about where he was going with that.
That's an interesting one that I've never really heard anybody kind of talk about, because you're right. Like, Maddie is having a lot of weird interactions with the computer equipment too. That's kind of how she gets on her way towards Inferno in some of these dream sequences.
Yeah, and it almost seems like it's an Inferno thing, because then Inferno does the whole like turning mailboxes into demons thing. But it's before Inferno, and it's in Australia, not New York. So
I don't know. That's a great question. Is like Nastir back there, like,
right. Yeah,
Nastir CD-ROM. I don't know. God, I have so many of these. A lot of them come out of the Krakoan era. There's
so many of those.
The one that still makes me laugh is the Kate Pride Gates thing, because the reason it cracks me up is because I'm pretty convinced that Jordan and Jerry think they answered this, and they absolutely never did. So that one's always really funny to me. That's
the one. I was going to say the Kitty Gate thing, the Kate Gate thing is that's the most Lost-esque mystery from the Hoxpox era for me, in that it's something that they introduced in a way that it was very clear this was a capital M mystery, and we were supposed to be asking this question.
Yep.
And what comes along with that in basic storytelling is the implication that it will be answered someday. You don't ask a question that you're not going to answer unless you're Damon Lindelof. And then we don't get an answer except in the form of them saying like, oh, it was just like her powers, or so it was never meant to be a big mystery. It just didn't work for her, and then we moved on. And it's like, well, no, that's not the way you structured it. It was structured like we were supposed to be asking this question. Don't try to tell us it was never meant to be a big mystery.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many other things like this in the era. Like, how did Phantom X come back to life? Why in the world did they rebuild the Xavier Mansion only to abandon it and let it get filled up by foliage, Sidri hunters, and then later Danger and a Danger family?
And now in From the Ashes in Uncanny X-Men, when the Warden is there's like personal effects in there again.
Yeah.
Like, she walks through Kitty's old room and there's pictures on it. Like, where did all that come from?
Doesn't make a dang bit of sense. What was Doug talking to in the basement of the Xavier Mansion in Giant Size?
Why did Doug hide
Warlock?
Yeah, why did Doug hide Warlock, or feel like he had to hide Warlock? That was one I wrote down too.
And then, the one that I hear a lot of X-Men fans bring up a lot, I do not care about this, but it is funny that people really latched onto this, is the Hunt for Wolverine mole. That reveal that there was a mole in the X-Men. And like, I love that people are still latching onto this thing from like 6 years ago. Like, it's not important at all, but that's a fun one. So lots of good ones there. I thought the yours were pretty good. All right. What's this next one, Austin?
So this next one from Dweller 42 on Blue Sky. Two questions. First one is, what is your favorite non-Marvel comic that you're keeping current on, and what do you like about it?
The two that I've been reading, they're both miniseries from Rom V, are Dawn Runner, which is a kind of twist on Evangelion with like a weird time jump thing in the middle of it. That one I'm reading primarily because Evan Cagel's art is like, oh my God, it's God tier art. I mean, the amount of line like cross hatching that he is doing to show texture and form across this, it is just astounding. And I'm very excited. The last issue is set to come out in September. I really want to get a trade of it when it comes out. The other one that I'm reading from Rom V is Rare Flavors, which has already ended, but I have not yet to finish it. Just a really unique story. I've never read a comic book that centers itself around the mythology that it does, and also around exactly what the title is suggesting, food and recipes and people investing their lives in making food and what that means as a human. Philippe Andrade's art, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but the artwork is also really, really fun in that book and complements the storytelling very well. So I highly recommend those two books. Austin, what are you reading that's not Marvel that you are enjoying? Anything?
I am. I'm a terrible comic critic in that I do not branch out of my comfort zones nearly as much as I should. So I have two answers to this question. The first is all of the Skybound GI Joe miniseries that are coming out now. I mean, I love my IP, but they've all been character based miniseries. So there was a Duke, there was a Cobra Commander, Destro and Scarlet are out right now, and I love the way that they are focused on those characters, and it really is about digging into the character. And each one of those miniseries is kind of has like a different tone and a different story style that it's aping that then fits that character. So Duke was sort of this almost like political thriller kind of conspiracy theory story. Cobra Commander was just this absolutely bonkers, like sci-fi / grand, almost Southern Gothic kind of thing.
That's interesting.
Scarlet is this just hugely entertaining super spot. Like it's James Bond meets like a Bruce Lee movie kind of thing. And then Destro is doing just this really great examination of his character through the guise of this personal war he's having with the Crimson Twins, the Zaymod and Tomax, if you remember your GI Joe.
I remember them. I think I had one.
It's
I
this
had one,
great
but
bit
not the
where,
other.
right? Yeah, same, exactly. Even though they sold them together, somehow I only ended up with one of them. But yeah, it's this great like character study of Destro as this like proud figure that is all about amassing power, and it uses the fact that it's technically like that it's setting up sort of the world of GI Joe that we have some familiar touchstones with, because we know that Destro's gonna end up working with Cobra Commander. He already kind of is, and we know that that's going to put him in this subservient position. And so there's this great tension in the story behind like Destro fighting to hang on to his power, and we already know that he's going to lose, and he just doesn't. And it's just really great stuff.
I might check this out because I have been enjoying the Skybound Transformers stuff.
Yeah, I've been reading that too, and that's a lot of fun as well.
And I'm just assuming it's all going to.
And then yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that's the whole. And I'm admittedly a little wary of that. So far, the GI Joe Transformer crossover stuff in these miniseries has been like very subtle and kind of backgrounded, and it's worked really well. But I know we're getting to a point where it's going to just kind of be full blown.
Oh, I'm sure
crossover stuff, and I'm curious to see how that's going to get handled. But for right now, these little character miniseries are just real bangers. And then the other thing I've been reading that I've kind of been digging is a miniseries from Mad Cave called Sanction, which is
I don't know this one.
It's like a murder mystery set in late 80s Leningrad. And it's one cop is the like seasoned, burnt out cop that just wants to close the cases and pump his numbers. And then the other one is this really earnest, well-meaning, spends too much time on easy cases because he wants to make sure that he's honoring the victims kind of dynamic. But within the lens of living in this like oppressive communist state, and the way that impacts their dynamic and their dynamic within the force, and how the real the real villain isn't so much the weird serial killer as it is the gears of the state that are kind of gumming up their investigation and letting the killer do his thing indirectly. But it was a little bit of a slow burn, but this last issue, number 3, came out a couple weeks ago, really kind of clicked all of the thematic pieces into place, and I've been enjoying that. So that's worth checking out if that seems like that's your jam.
No, it sounds like some really good recommendations. All right, so Dweller also asked an X-Men question, which was, which X character is a 10 out of 10 reading experience, but a negative 10 out of 10 as someone you'd want to meet in real life? What do you think? Anybody come jump off the page there for you?
I feel like at the end of the day, it would be pretty annoying to hang out with Gambit for a really long time. Like, he'd be flirting with your wife. He'd be randomly blowing up. He'd be trying to like take over the kitchen and make, cook food himself and be like, that's not gumbo. This is gumbo. And I don't know. Fun character, but I feel like in real life his shtick would wear thin real fast.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The recent portrayal of him by Channing Tatum, which it just kind of proved why that maybe wouldn't be a good idea, and actualized. My answer to this is pretty simple.
Right.
I feel like all of the X-Men might fit this. You know what I mean? Like, I want to read their stories. I don't think I want to hang out with many of them. You know what I mean? Like, there's very few characters that in real life sound like a good idea. That, I mean, at the bare minimum, I'm going to get like in the middle of some sort of superhero fight if I spend the afternoon with them. So, I guess if I'm taking the question at face value, like I always love Kid Omega. I love Quentin Quire. Would never want to spend more than 5 minutes in a room with someone like Quentin Quire, right?
Yeah. Yep. That's a good answer. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. He would be insufferable if you had to actually hang out with him in real life.
All right. What do we got next?
All right. So Unearthly Child asked, since we know who all 3 of Kurt's parents are now, where do you think being tridactyl, having the 3, or not appendages, digits, the 3 digits comes from, since none of his parental have that particular element to them?
I mean, the real answer to this is Dave Cockrum, right?
Because Dave Cockrum thought it was cool.
Yeah, I mean, that is the real answer. This really did get me thinking, though, to see if there really could be a way to biologically explain it, because whoever's asking this question is absolutely right that it doesn't really make sense, since Azazel doesn't have the 3 digits. The only thing that I could think of is maybe it's a Mystique thing, like because of her shape shifting, and that's where it comes from. But I don't know. Did you have an idea here?
I mean, my only thought was that it's that random element of chaos that comes into it when mutants are born, because we don't always. I am no geneticist. I don't even play one on TV. So I don't know how all of this works, but we've certainly seen it where 2 mutant parents will have a mutant child whose power has absolutely nothing to do with their abilities. Like we kind of think of, Cable is the son of Cyclops and Jean Grey's genetics, and he's got telepathy and telekinesis just like his mom, but it usually doesn't work that way. And so I think that's where it's just, this was, he got the teleporting and the demonic stuff from Azazel and the blue from Mystique, but the the digits, that's just, hey, sometimes weird happens when mutants are born.
It's just part of his deal. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think Beak's parents were like, oh, I can't wait to, give birth to a scrawny bird. It's just like, just kind of what happens.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
J.A. Mayer on Blue Sky asks, do you guys think Glob Herman is still mad at She-Hulk for embarrassing him in X-Men Legacy 266 and 267? I had to go back and read this. What do you think?
Well, I think you need to make sure you ask Zack this one when he gets back. But I don't know. Glob doesn't seem like the grudge carrying type.
I said
he seems
the same
like an
thing.
easygoing fella. Like, no, I don't think so.
I can't imagine the Glob Herman like feeding his chickens and being like, "That's She-Hulk. She threw me down to the ground after I set myself."
Especially because it's She-Hulk. Like, it's not even it was a villain in that they were sort of on opposite sides of a conflict, but it's not like she's a bad person that he's gonna get upset about.
No, I can't imagine that he's upset about that. All right. We've got a couple from Asimov Fangirl.
Yes. Always great to hear from Asimov Fangirl. First one, I love this question. What is your preferred edition / way to read and collect comics? Digital, soft covers, digital omnibus, deluxe editions, etc.
That's a great question. I find the way I am reading comics for the most part is digitally on a computer. Just because of where I might be, like with my laptop or on a lunch break at work, or I've got my iPad open, whatever it might be. My preference would be either the individual floppy or a paperback, like trade paperback. I think those, and when I'm collecting, I find that those are the two things that I'm looking for the most. I love those old 90s trade paperbacks that they're still using kind of the thinner paper. It's still got like a nice grain to it. It's got an age to it. It's got a kind of like smell to it that I think of as a used bookstore kind of smell. All of these things kind of feed into what it is. In terms of newer stuff, I mean, I will still occasionally buy an omnibus, but that's more of like I don't read omnibuses. I look at them more as like a museum piece that I take off the shelf. How about you?
I'm pretty close to where you are. I honestly, I don't know if I've read a physical single issue of a comic book in 15 years.
Wow. Okay.
I read nearly every comic I read on my iPad or my laptop if it's something that I'm reviewing and I want to take notes on it alongside. But like everything that I review for my examinations, posts, all that kind of stuff, I'm pulling it up on my laptop. I have Marvel Unlimited. I'm reading that, or on my iPad. I have Marvel Unlimited. I'm reading that on my iPad. They lost me when way back in the 90s when they switched to the glossy paper and it went from being like newsprint to being like a magazine. I mean, I was 14 or 15 at the time and I just didn't like it. I miss that newsprint. And if comics were still printed that way, I know it's better for the colors. It lasts longer. It's a better quality all around, but I miss that old pulpy comic feel. And then as far as reading older stuff that would be printed on that's where the trade paperbacks are just tough to beat. I'm a big Marvel Epic Collections guy. I have a ton of those. I'm super, super excited that DC is finally launching their version of that line with the
smaller
DC's
digest versions.
Yeah, no, not even those. They're doing like Epic Collections, sort of character series focus, not in chronological order, volume wise, but collecting a run of issues. I'm going all in on those. That'll be fun. And then even on top of all of that, yeah, I'm still out there digging through long boxes, going to cons, trying to build my collection of old single issue stuff. I just again, I'm part of the problem. I don't read those. I mean, it's I buy them to have them in my collection, but if I'm going to read the actual story, I'm reading it digitally or I'm reading it in a trade collection. And yeah. Well, and like you said, omnibus, I buy the occasional omnibus, but it's definitely a like for posterity's sake kind of a thing or for reference. Yeah. I have the the old Marvel handbooks collected in omnibus form, and I'll pull those off the shelf every once in a while and look something up rather than Googling it. Or I bought the Romnibus just because that's something that will not get collected once the license, once
Yes.
they stop whatever agreement they reached here, that's going to go away. So I thought, well, I'm going to buy that in the omnibus, and then I'll have it on the shelf. And if I ever need to look at it, I'll never have to worry about it. So
you can get a ROM Marvel Legends action figure to go with it.
Yes, exactly.
Asimov also asked, do you ever think about tabula rasa, the hyper evolving jungle created in Montana by a celestial life seed? Is this waking you up at night?
No, to be honest, I do not think about tabula rasa, but if it showed up in a new comic book story, I would love that. That would be great. That's exactly the kind of like little continuity nugget I'd love to see someone return to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think about it often, but we did think about it not that far ago. We covered the issue that Bendis sends his Uncanny team in there for training, and that was fun. So yeah, bring it back. All right, what's next?
At Rugby Skin asks, what are y'all's favorites when it comes to amazing art, horrible story, and amazing story and horrible art?
This is a tricky question because I think that if either of them is screwed up, then the comic is going to not be great. So it's very difficult to do this. I will say, for amazing art, horrible story, if Chris Bachalo is drawing it, I'm usually going to like it a lot more, even if the writing is subpar, because I'm still just like engaged. Whereas like the one that came to mind for amazing story, horrible art is like the Igor Cordy issues of New X-Men. Obviously extremely well written, but like look really bad because they're so rushed. And so I don't know. Did you have anything that came to mind for this one?
Well, my initial smartass answer to amazing art, horrible story was, isn't that just most 90s comics? But and then that zeroed me in on something like, say, the Uncanny X-Men issues of Onslaught that Joe Mad draws, which are, utterly gorgeous because they're drawn by Joe Mad, but are also a lot of nonsensical garbage because the Onslaught story got co-opted and was getting rewritten on the fly and doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then amazing story, horrible art. I don't necessarily think that it's an amazing story, but it's certainly an important story, which is the Kitty Pryde and Wolverine miniseries, which is drawn by Al Milgrom, and God bless him, I cannot stand Al Milgrom's pencils. Fantastic, groundbreaking, important editor. He was the Marvel fanfare guy. Don't mind him as an inker. Yeah, he inked like every issue of X Factor for 75, 100 issues, something like. I mean, insane. Cannot stand him as a penciler. Just I feel like it's like a little kid's like stick figure drawings is what he's doing, and I do not understand how he kept getting pencil work, let alone like pegged by Shooter to do Secret Wars 2, this like big marquee event that Shooter was all about, and he hands it to this guy. It's just it drives me nuts. So Kitty Pryde Wolverine, very important story. Kitty's development. Kitty's development into Shadowcat introduces Ogun. It's a pivotal story in the X-Men narrative, but I read it once and was like, I never want to look at this again because I just cannot stand this art.
No, I'm with you. That's a really good example. All right, I'm going to skip around here a little bit. Let's go down to this person, Jacket Ball Train, asked a couple questions, but I want to zone in on this one that is about Dazzler and Taylor Swift, because I have
this is a good one.
I have some thoughts about this. In NYX #1, Ms. Marvel quoted Taylor Swift. This means that Taylor Swift exists in the same world as Dazzler. Are they friends, enemies, collaborators? Do they have a Drake Kendrick level diss track feud? Is Dazzler the elder statesman, or are they contemporaries? Austin, do you have thoughts on the Dazzler Taylor Swift comparisons?
I love the idea of them having Drake and Kendrick level diss tracks. But I think where I came down on this, and this is a little bit of a sop to real world timing and not goofy Marvel time, which is that I feel like Dazzler is probably like Madonna to Taylor Swift in terms of was there, and Madonna might even be too big for what Dazzler was, because the vibe with Dazzler was always like she was close but not quite there in terms of being a superstar. And so I think that Taylor Swift probably likes Dazzler and sees her as an inspiration or a forebear, at least in terms of being like a pop figure. And Dazzler is nice to Taylor Swift, but is also a little bit resentful because she got there and Dazzler didn't quite get there.
I have never, ever understood the Taylor Swift is Dazzler thing. It does not make sense. Taylor Swift is the most successful artist on the planet, and Dazzler is
and that's not what Dazzler
specifically
was.
As like she had her time in the spotlight, but is also kind of washed up, and is always just trying to get a comeback going, right? She has her fans, but she's not a global superstar. That's kind of the point of the character. So,
and the tragedy of the character is that she probably has the talent to be a Taylor Swift, but can't escape the superhero life, the life of a mutant, the life of what have you. And so then she just can never fully commit to it.
Yeah. So I think in my mind, this is also tough with the sliding time scale, right? So it's hard to say like how old Dazzler is at current space. Because like my first brain thought, what am I talking about? My first thought was like, I remember when Olivia Rodrigo introduced her tour dates and the Breeders were opening up for Olivia Rodrigo. And I was like, that makes sense to me. Like I can see Dazzler being sort of the retro thing that Taylor Swift's mom played for her growing up. Like that makes more sense to me than anything else.
Right.
So
I'm with you there.
I will since I skipped around, you tell me where you want to go next.
Well, let's do Jack of All Trains other question here about Excalibur, which is, do you think Illyana was considered for the original Excalibur team? The sword motif makes her an obvious choice. Obviously, Inferno is already in motion, but you could place her on the team instead of someone else. Who would she replace?
I don't think there's any indication that Illyana was ever considered for the Excalibur team that I'm aware of. So I would doubt that very much.
No.
If you were going to swap somebody out, I think it would have to be Rachel, maybe. Like,
probably.
It's tough. I mean, because I don't think at that time they would have swapped out Captain Britain.
No, because that was kind of the whole point. I mean, Excalibur was sort of born of Chris Claremont wanting to do a Captain Britain book again. Like, he created him and then left, and then a whole bunch of people, including Alan Moore, kind of did some interesting things with the character. And so then Claremont says, hey, I'll play with him again. At the same time, wanting to do something with Alan Davis, and then having these cast off X-Men, and Marvel being like, hey, the X-Men sell, let's do another X-Men book. And so you kind of have to have Captain Britain and Megan, and you also kind of have to have the cast off X-Men, and that's your roster right there. Yeah. It would have been kind of interesting because originally he was going to have Colossus with Nightcrawler and Kitty and Rachel on that team, but then he realized that having Captain Britain there, two strong guys, it's redundant. So he dropped Colossus back off in Uncanny. So rather than take off somebody, throw Illyana in there as the Rasputin stand-in could be kind of interesting. But I don't think there was ever any intent to put her there from the beginning.
It's funny. I mean, it could create like a really great love triangle there with Kitty and Rachel, and then have Illyana involved in there too. So I can see it being fun. I don't know. I don't think of Illyana fitting in with a book like that. And its sense of humor. Speaking of Excalibur, my one and only Anna Papard asked, why do you hate Excalibur so much? Be honest. Austin, do you hate Excalibur?
I don't hate Excalibur at all. Excalibur is an utter delight. I think I have been on Anna's podcast a few times talking about Excalibur. So I think I've mentioned this before, but I resisted Excalibur for a long time when I first got into the X-Men because it was the funny book, and I've always had a weird aversion to whimsy in my sci-fi fantasy storytelling. It's very much a me thing. I've worked through it, and eventually I came back to the original Excalibur and found it to just be an utter delight.
It's the book that I've grown to like much more over time, especially since starting doing this show 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I still find large parts of it to be not great, and there's enough of these patches of it, but it's just like any other book. It's not like New Mutants is any better in that regard either.
Well, yeah, I mean, to be fair, there's a solid 20 issues in the middle of early Excalibur where Chris Claremont and Alan Davis can't both be in the same room together, apparently, or can't be in the same book together. And it's just a lot of real fill-in level stuff.
It is.
For a long, long time. And that's not great.
No.
I'm not going to defend
that. So I think
but
the book is in large part a mess in a lot of ways. But I also think that Anna might have been directing this more towards Zack, who I think has much more animosity towards the book than I do. That said, the Ben Robb stuff at the end and even the Warren Ellis stuff, it's pretty bad.
Oh yeah. I mean, my affection for Excalibur beyond any thin glimmer of nostalgia ends when Alan Davis leaves. With issue 67, and which is ironically, I didn't start reading it on the regular until Fatal Attractions with 71, and even with that, I don't have a ton of affection for.
No, me neither. Me neither. All right, looks like we have a question about the MCU X-Men. Okay.
Here we go. Uncle Shouty on Twitter is asking, when the inevitable MCU X-Men movie happens and you wish on a falling star, what mutant who hasn't been used in live action do you hope to see?
This was really tough because every time I thought of a character, I realized that the Fox X-Men movies had done some terrible version of that character.
Right?
I was like, ooh.
Between the movies and Gifted and the Legion TV show, and
I mean, the list is long. So the first thing that I want to say is that when I'm wishing on a falling star for MCU X-Men, I am wishing for the primetime Paul Smith, Chris Claremont lineup, the X-Men.
Yeah.
I want to see these guys. So I guess part of that might be Lockheed. I would love to see
that's a good one.
The actual lineup, including the dragon. I think that would be a lot of fun. Since I don't think they'll do that, and I know that they'll probably screw it up anyway. One character who I don't think has appeared in a Fox X, I think they were referenced in a Fox X-Men movie, but never seen, that I think would be an interesting character would be Forge.
Yes, I sadly pulled up a list of X-Men characters and started going down it to try to find ones that hadn't been there. And Forge was a name that I hit on, and I said, I don't think they've done a live action Forge yet.
No, I don't think they ever did. Did you have another one that you're like dying to see that hasn't been in the movies?
Yeah, so my answer to this is a little bit like your Lockheed answer, which is more of a like thematic spiritual answer, which is that one of my big problems with the Fox X-Men movies is that they often, especially at the beginning, seemed ashamed to be comic book movies or movies starring characters who came from comic books. And so a lot of the like, not necessarily goofy, but just more outlandish and very comic booky stuff, like Lockheed, never gets in there because that's that we got to be as like hyper realistic as possible. Yeah, we're serious stories for serious people.
We're men.
And so we've done twice now. We've done the live action adaptation of Dark Phoenix Saga, and there are two reasons, in my opinion, that it has never quite worked. One is that it's a story that you can't do in 1 2-hour movie. It is built to be serialized. Its power comes from its serialization. And so you need to have things build over time up to it. And then the other is that in every version, they completely cut out all of the utterly bonkers and bananas Shi'ar stuff.
It's true.
I want live action Lilandra with triangle feather hair. I want live action We're the Legion of Superheroes Imperial Guard, and I want live action I'm Cyclops' dad, who's a space pirate that sleeps with a skunk lady, Starjammers. I want it all, and I want it in an X-Men movie.
That sounds great. Oh my goodness. All right. I'm going to go back to one that we skipped. This question is, are there any D-list X characters that you like where you have no explanation for why they never took off? Is there someone that you are thinking of here?
No, I know why all the D-list characters I like didn't take off.
I had an answer for this that I don't know is technically a D-lister, but the one that did pop into my mind is Armor, because
that's a good one.
Armor is one of those characters that this goes back to the Peach Momoko stuff we were talking about earlier, but it's wild to me that this character, who's like such a solid design and such an easy thing to like develop this character, her whole thing since she started was just, I can't get on the X-Men. And it's like,
right.
Wait, but when you started, you were on the X-Men.
Right.
So like, what's going on? And I'm just eternally curious why writers don't seem to want to play with this character. It's almost as if she's just become like this nagging presence. So that's weird to me.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, I gave this one some thought, but I'm like, I don't know. I like Rusty Collins, but I know no one else does. I'm not going to try to argue that he's better. All the goofy Silver Age villains that I have a lot of affection for. I know why they're also Rands, and so Ted Roberts. I know no one remembers Ted Roberts, but yeah.
All right. These last couple of questions are podcast questions. So what do we have first?
First one up from Rose MJ44 on Twitter. Would you ever be willing to post your reading list prior to the week's podcast so we can read the books before the podcast is out?
This is something that Zack and I have talked about before, and it's something that we can talk about again. So my short answer is I'm going to have to get back to you on this. I see this two ways. The first is that I understand why someone would want to read ahead because they want to have a better listening experience when they're listening to the pod, because they'll have read the book and now they're following along. The argument against it is that we do appreciate the element of surprise because our episodes are thematic. I think there is a certain level of fun in, well, what are they going to talk about next that ties into what it is that they talked about in the first story? So let me get back to you on that. That is definitely something that we could consider.
And I'll say as a patron of the show, I will often not even, when you guys will post this week on Boda, we're talking about this and this kind of a thing. I usually don't even read them because I like that part of it where it's, what are they going to talk about? What stories are they going to pick that fits this theme? And that is kind of fun, the element of surprise. But I totally get the desire to want to be able to listen to the podcast as soon as possible, being familiar with the stories that you're going to talk about.
Yeah, I could see it both ways. Our good buddy over at Adventures in Poor Taste, Chris Hassan, asked a good question that, Austin, I think this is a good one for you too. Being, an X-Men journalist, comics writer. This is, has X-Men podcasters, comics journalists, and critics positively or negatively impacted you, or impacted how you read and experience X-Men comics?
Yeah, I loved this question. This is a great question. I would say it has absolutely had a positive impact on how I read and experience X-Men comics, and really just comics in general. I am an inherently lazy person. So it is very easy for me to consume media and just let it wash over me and be like, that was fine, or I didn't really like that, and then just sort of move on. And I did that for many, many, many years, reading comics and whatnot. And so being a critic, having sort of a to-do list of I'm going to read this and I'm going to have to think critically about it so that I can turn around and put those thoughts into words, forces me to engage with the material on a deeper level than I would otherwise. And so that's why Zack likes to give me a hard time sometimes in the CXF Slack about how anytime I'm like, oh, I should really read this run or this series or this story that I'm not familiar with, but if I did, I'd want to like turn it into a project, some kind of writing project or whatever. It's like you can just read stuff for fun. I'm like, I know, but if I turn it into a project, that's going to force me to like really sink my teeth into it and think about it in a way that if I just read it, it's going to go in one ear and out the other. And but I also, it's being a critic has really made me feel like I'm part of a community.
Yes.
Writing is such a solitary act. And for a long time, I really liked that about it. But as I've gotten older, I've really enjoyed having a community of writers to write with, like literally, our talks articles, but also just, having people that are reading the same things, discussing the same things. That's really nice. And the other thing is, it gives me a reason to keep reading them, even when they're kind of shitty.
Definitely true.
Like even a bad story, it's like, okay, well, I can write about this or I can kvetch about this. I know what people are talking about. And so even if I'm personally not loving a particular story or series or era as much as others, it still keeps me engaged with the material, which I appreciate that too.
Yeah. Chris, I really appreciate this question because it did make me think quite a bit about how I approach the material. I would agree with you, Austin. I think on the whole, it's largely affected me positively. The amount of interactions I've had with creators has grown tremendously. The amount of community that I've been able to develop over the course of doing this podcast in particular has been huge. Where I will say that there's probably a little bit of a negative is that sometimes I am so inside baseball now, about what's going on, that can detract from having sort of a fresh read on something.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah. So, like we were talking about From the Ashes, and of course that then comes along with the baggage of I'm not really reading this as like a fresh-eyed reader. You know what I mean?
Right,
I'm reading it with all of the context of all of the stuff I've read, all of the other creators who I know have worked on this stuff. So it's harder to give a fair, fresh, perspective to something like that. But I don't know. Like, I think that by looking at all of this stuff on such a regular basis, it just allows me to be a closer reader of what it is that I'm looking at. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there's benefits and negatives to learning how to critique things. And then is it possible to just sit back and relax and enjoy something, as opposed to always thinking about what you're going to say about it. But great question, Chris. And I would be curious what Chris's answer is after doing X-Men
I would too.
For so long.
Right. Yeah, he's in the exact same boat there. All right, so then the last question from Jacket Ball Train on Twitter: How tangential are you willing to get with your list? I know Peter Corbeau's super astronaut, Peter Corbeau, first appearance is on the list. Would the 1990 Knights of Pendragon series from Marvel UK, starring Inspector Di Thomas with cameos from Alistair and Alisande Stewart, Captain Britain, count?
Man, this is a tough one because the real answer is there's no hard and fast rules about this. It's basically like, what can we get away with and what can we justify to ourselves? So there's no handbook behind the scenes here, folks. It's basically like Zack and I talking to each other and going, all right, well, does this Alias story really count? It has a mutant in it. It's like, is this an X-Men? Or, and like, so sometimes we will just be like, well, it counts because it counts. And, obviously, as you look down the list, you're going to see Howard the Duck. You're going to see Alias. You're going to see those Incredible Hulk issues. And, sometimes it's like, but it does, to us, we made it, work in our minds. So, that's okay.
I think it's great. I love to look down lists like that and see those kind of oddball, goofball, why is this included, real tangential connection, tenuous connection kind of stuff. That's always a blast. I think
it is scary.
The list is what you say it is.
Yeah, and it's also scary too, because like if you really start getting like that tangential, lots of stuff starts counting, and I don't know if we want to ever touch that stuff. So
every Marvel comic counts, Adam. Start reviewing every Marvel comic.
All right, we did have one last question, and we were able to get Zack to answer this question via voicemail, I think, or a voice memo while he was sitting in an airport. So the question, Zack, if you were ready to answer this comes from Chris E1701 on Blue Sky. What kind of HVAC system do you think was installed in the Xavier Institute? So let's go to Zack for that answer.
All right, this is Zack coming to you live from being busy. So the Institute has been a lot of things: a residence, a dormitory, a school, a laboratory, a gymnasium, an underground paramilitary bunker, and each of those applications has their own unique HVAC needs. Looking at every possible rendering I can find of the school across the years, I don't see a mechanical room or any outside condensing units. This implies that they are using a geothermal heat pump system, also known as a water source heat pump. That makes sense given that water source heat pumps have industry-leading efficiencies, and the fact that Xavier's is already digging deep for sub-basements, and they've got a pond that they could run a loop to, that they could use for even more efficient water-to-water heat transfer. So that's probably what they're using really for their condensing side. As far as the terminals, I can't recall seeing any PTACs in the dorms. I don't see any like fan coils or anything. It implies they're using a ducted central air system, probably with some VAVs or something to balance out that load. Now, to meet ASHRAE 62.1 ventilation codes, they're going to need a DOAS to bring in outside air. This is especially true for their sub-basements where the sensible load's going to be low because, hey, underground's not that hot. But the latent heat loads are going to be pretty darn high. There's going to be a lot of humidity condensation that they're going to have to pull out of that space. So they're likely using a packaged indoor DOAS that's tied into that water source heat pump. They're probably also going to need some sort of chiller for their scientific equipment, but honestly, that's outside of my personal area of expertise. So I'd defer to whatever mechanical firm that, Charles has hired for the job. So long and short, honestly, I bet the Xavier Institute has a pretty darn good AC system that goes above and beyond code minimums.
I'm very glad that Zack was able to take a minute. I don't know where he recorded that from. I do think it was in an airport, but Austin, thank you so much for
that is, yes, I was
out.
worried we would not get an answer to that.
No. We can't just let these HVAC questions hanging. But thank you so much for taking a couple minutes today and helping out with our summer mailbag. This was great.
Absolutely. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for asking me back on. It was a good time. These were some really great questions. I had a blast preparing these.
Yeah, they did a good job. Austin, if people want to find you, what do you got going on? Let us know what's up.
Yeah, you can follow me on all the various social sites of your choosing. It's at Austin Gorton on Twitter, and then that's pretty much where Blue Sky, Instagram, Mastodon is still a thing.
Oh,
I think I'm still sending stuff there. So Austin Gorton at those various sites. Obviously, you can find me writing at Comics XF and on my own website, therealgentlemanofleisure.com. But follow me on the socials, and I try to update that with all of the links to my various stuff as I go along.
Fantastic. Folks, you can always follow me, Adam Reck, Blue Sky Instagram, Arthur Stacy on Twitter. Next week, Zack is back, and we are talking about stories that are super dumb. They're so dumb, they turn around and become super fun. So that's going to be a really fun episode. This has been Battle of the Atom, and we hope you survived the experience.
Get it!